Have you ever found yourself scrolling through your phone at 11 p.m.? You see an old friend, someone who didn't even perform as well as you in high school, just posted a photo receiving the keys to a new car. You see a girl from your college cohort checking in from Paris. You see a 24-year-old featured in the news for a successful funding round, and you, putting your phone down, staring at the ceiling, hear a small but very familiar voice in your head. What am I doing with my life? In that moment, there's something happening that you don't even realize. That feeling, heavy, vague, paralyzing. It isn't motivation. It's a slow-acting poison, and most of us are drinking it every day without realizing it. It sounds harmless, but it's silently warping your self-perception. Today, I'm not going to give you the love yourself or don't care what others think, talk. Those phrases sound nice, but they're useless. I'm going to show you exactly what's happening inside your brain, why social comparison never helps you move forward, and specifically what you should do instead. No philosophy, just practical tools. Let's start now. And once you understand this mechanism, you'll never look at social media the same way again. I want to ask you something honestly. Have you ever sat down to make a plan, full of excitement and energy, only to stumble upon someone else who's already done the same thing, but better, faster, and more professionally than you, and suddenly, that plan feels pointless? You don't delete the file, but you don't open it again, either. It just sits there, a silent testament to the inferiority you've projected onto yourself. And this is where most people get it completely wrong. That's exactly the mechanism I want to dissect today. And to help you see it more clearly, I want to use a simple image. Imagine you're sitting at a concert, on stage, the lights are bright, the costumes are beautiful, and the applause is endless. The audience only sees those 3 perfect hours. They don't see the 3 years of practice in a damp, moldy room. They don't see the 200 failures. They don't see the nights that artists sat crying alone, wondering if they actually had enough talent. But the problem isn't the stage, it's how you look at it. When you compare yourself, you're taking your entire backstage, your doubts, your stumbles, the mornings you couldn't even drag yourself out of bed, and measuring it against someone else's 3 hours on stage. It's a comparison that's never fair, and you'll lose 100% of the time. And if you keep playing that game, the result's always the same. But its harm doesn't just stop at a feeling of inferiority. It runs much deeper. It touches your very core, your ability to take action. Level 1, behavioral paralysis. When the brain receives the signal I'm inferior, the amygdala, the part of the brain that processes threats, immediately triggers a self-defense response. And the way your brain protects you is by doing nothing. It's not because you're lazy. It's because your brain's trying to keep you away from further feelings of failure. It sounds merciful, but in reality, it's imprisoning you. And here's the most painful paradox. You think you lack discipline. In reality, you're being locked down by a survival mechanism. Level 2, the erosion of your internal compass. When you're constantly looking outward to measure your self-worth, you gradually lose the ability to know what you truly want. You start chasing goals that aren't yours. You're exhausted without understanding why, because you're running on someone else's track, wearing someone else's shoes, heading toward a finish line that isn't yours. And if you don't stop here, the price you'll pay is even greater. Level 3, the dead-end loop. You compare, you feel like you've lost. You try, then you see someone else who's better, and you compare again. This loop has no end, because there's always someone better than you. Always, no matter how far you progress. There's always someone above looking down. So the question is, how do you escape a game where the rules guarantee you'll always lose? And here's the scariest part. Your brain doesn't compare randomly. It's programmed to do so. If you don't understand that mechanism, you'll never be able to break free. And in the next part, you'll see why that brain, which once helped your ancestors survive, is ruining your future today. In 1954, psychologist Leon Festinger published a theory that remains one of the most important foundations of social psychology to this day. He called it social comparison theory. Its core message is simple. Humans have an instinct to evaluate themselves by comparing with those around them. And this is where the story starts to take a turn. It sounds normal, but here's the twist that few people talk about. Originally, this mechanism helped our ancestors survive. If I was weaker than an enemy, I needed to know so I could avoid direct confrontation. If I was better, the tribe would give me a more important role. Comparison, in that context, was a survival tool, not a growth tool. The problem is, the brain doesn't update itself with the times. But now, the world's completely changed. Your ancestors only compared themselves to about 150 people in their tribe. That's the human social cognitive limit. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar called this Dunbar's number. The human brain's only designed to process relationships with around that many people. Take a second to think about that number. But you're comparing yourself to 8 billion people globally, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, through a square screen in the palm of your hand. Your brain's still running ancient software, but it's receiving 21st century data. That's why you're exhausted without knowing why. And this is the real price of the digital age. Let me tell you about a period in my own life. When I was 28, I was struggling to rebuild everything after a pretty heavy collapse, both professionally and personally. During that time, I had a habit of reading many case studies about successful people at 25 or 26 in the same field I was in. My initial intention was to learn, but the actual result was paralysis, and I didn't realize I was sliding into a trap. I started thinking, I'm too late, I'm not good enough. I started wrong from the beginning, and I spent nearly 6 months in that state, unable to make any important decisions because my mind was constantly overshadowed by others. 6 months, just to be stuck in a race that no one asked me to join. It wasn't because I lacked ability. It was because I was using other people's success to torture myself, until one day I realized I wasn't learning from them. I was using them as evidence to indict myself, and this was the moment everything changed. And here's what I want you to understand clearly. Psychology divides comparison into two very different types. The first type's upward comparison, comparing yourself to those better than you. This can be inspiring if you use it right, but if you use it wrong, it becomes a knife turned against you. It can lift you up, or it can tear you down. The second type's downward comparison, comparing yourself to those worse off to feel better about yourself. It sounds harmless, but this is the subtle trap. It creates a false sense of comfort, and your brain, once comfortable, won't have the motivation to move forward anymore. And that's the paradox. You think you're protecting your self-esteem. In reality, you're paralyzing your potential. Both have one thing in common. They direct your attention outward, and when you look outward too much, you lose connection with the most important thing, your own internal compass. When the compass loses its way, every effort becomes exhausting. So instead of comparing, what should you do? This isn't a love yourself more kind of answer. This is a specific, scientifically grounded technique, and it completely changes how your brain measures progress. And the next part is where you'll learn how to reverse this entire mechanism. Before getting into the solution, I want to be straight with you to avoid any misunderstanding. I'm not saying you shouldn't look at others. Successful people are valuable sources of learning, if you know how to look at them correctly. The issue isn't who you're looking at, but which yardstick you're using to measure. And that's exactly what I want to help you change today. And when you change the yardstick, your entire emotional state changes with it. The first solution, vertical comparison, not horizontal comparison. Most of us are used to horizontal comparison. You measure yourself against others on a spatial axis. Me versus them, me versus him, me versus her. This is a comparison axis that'll never give you a sustainable win, because there's always someone out there ahead of you at some stage, and it's a race with no finish line. But there's another axis few people think about. Vertical comparison over time. It's not you versus others, it's you today versus you 6 months ago, a year ago, 3 years ago. This is where you have control. The question's no longer, am I as good as them? The new question is, am I better than my previous self? Just a small shift in the question, but it changes the entire game. Sounds simple, but this is a very real psychological mechanism. When your brain measures progress on a personal timeline, it receives a signal of growth and releases dopamine in a steady, sustainable way instead of the cortisol, the stress hormone that inferior comparison creates. And here's the key point. Your brain doesn't need to beat others. It needs evidence that you're moving forward. What do you need to do tonight? Open your notes. Write down 3 things. What have I achieved in the last 3 months that I couldn't do 6 months ago? It doesn't have to be a big achievement. Just keep it real. A smaller skill, a new habit, a difficult conversation you finally dared to start. No one else needs to know, but your brain needs to see it. Don't skip this exercise. This is how you recalibrate your internal measurement system. Second solution, learn from others. Don't measure against others. The difference sounds tiny, but the consequences aren't. It's a very slight difference in how you frame a question, but it creates completely different results. When you measure, you trigger a sense of inferiority. The brain shifts into defense mode, and you paralyze. And in that state, you can't be creative. When you learn, you activate a growth mindset. The brain shifts into analytical mode, and you take action. Same person, same circumstances, but 2 completely different states. It's actually very simple to switch between those 2 states. Just change one question. And here's the deciding question. Instead of asking, why do they have it and I don't? Ask, what specifically did they do to get there? The first's a victim's question. It looks at the result and blames itself. The second's a learner's question. It looks at the process and finds the lesson. One question makes you shrink, the other makes you grow. Let me give you a very specific example. You see someone with a 1 million view video on YouTube. Instead of sitting there being jealous or wondering why they got it and you didn't, you write down what colors they used for the thumbnail, how many seconds the first hook was, how they structured the content, where the CTA was, what the editing pace was like. Just by shifting that perspective, you've turned an imaginary rival into a free teacher, and that's how mature people use other people's success. The best aren't those who don't look at others. They're the ones who know how to look the right way. The third solution, redesign your information environment. And this is where you stop blaming yourself. I'll tell you something straight that many people don't want to hear. Your brain isn't stronger than the algorithm. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, these platforms aren't designed to help you feel good about yourself. They're designed to keep you scrolling, watching, and interacting. And the most effective way to do that is by constantly triggering comparison, showing you what others have that you don't. And if you think you're immune to that, you're underestimating the machine behind the screen. If your feed's full of other people's highlight reels, your brain will constantly compare no matter how many times you remind yourself not to. Because it isn't that your willpower's weak, it's that you're fighting a multi-billion-dollar optimized machine. On one side is willpower, on the other is the system. The result's usually predetermined, so don't fight with willpower. Change the battlefield. This is a strategic move, not an emotional one. Specifically, ruthlessly unfollow accounts that leave you feeling inferior after watching. It isn't because they're bad or you hate them. It's simply because your brain isn't strong enough to process that data healthily at this time. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. You don't owe anyone the right to occupy your mental space. Second, follow with intention. Only follow people you're actually learning from, not passively admiring. Passive admiration is watching for fun. Intentional learning is opening up with the question, what can I apply from this person? One side is consumption, the other's value extraction. Third, create space. 30 minutes at the start of the day. No social media, no comparison, just do your own thing. Those 30 minutes, though they sound small, will change so much if you do them long enough. Because that's the time your brain gets to live at its own pace, without being pulled into someone else's rhythm. Just 30 minutes. But they're 30 minutes where you aren't living someone else's life. The fourth solution, redefine your measure of success. This is the deepest solution. And in my opinion, it's the root of it all. I want to ask you a question, and I want you to answer honestly, not for me, but for yourself. Is your measure of success one you chose, or are you borrowing it from someone else? Stop for a few seconds before answering. When I ask this to many people, most pause because they've never truly asked themselves that. They chase money, fame, and the milestone society calls success without stopping to ask, is this mine? And this is the greatest contradiction. You can achieve everything society praises yet still feel empty. If you don't define what success looks like for your specific life, you'll forever use someone else's definition. And then you'll forever lose on someone else's turf, because that turf wasn't designed for you. You can't win a game where the rules aren't chosen by you. This is an abstract philosophy. Try this exercise today. No waiting. Take out a piece of paper, write at the top of the page. If no one knew and no one cared, what would I want my life to look like in 5 years? Then write, no censoring, no wondering what others think. Just write what you truly want. This question sounds simple, but it peels away many layers of masks. It's the first time many of us actually hear our own voice instead of the noise from outside. I want to add one more thing before finishing this part, because if you don't understand this, you'll give up too early. Not because I want to weigh you down, but because I want you to be realistic. The solutions I've shared aren't a magic formula. The human brain needs time to create new habits. Research by Philippa Lally at University College London shows that, on average, a habit takes 18 to 254 days to form, depending on the person and the behavior. It isn't 21 days like you usually hear. So if you try for a week and don't see a difference yet, that isn't failure. That's the process. But what I know for sure, and I'm saying this from my own experience, not from books, is that you can't build your own life while constantly looking through someone else's window. And the final question is, how much longer do you want to keep living like this? I want to leave you with one thing to remember after this video, because if you forget everything else, remember this: comparison isn't the enemy. It's an instinct, and instincts aren't at fault. The fault lies in how we use it for the wrong purpose. We use other people's stage to judge our own backstage. We use someone else's destination to measure our own starting point. And just like that, we create a sentence for ourselves without a single trial ever being held. And the most dangerous part's this: we believe that sentence is the truth. Instead of using others as a ruler, use them as a mirror to learn from. Same person, same data, completely different ways of using it. Instead of asking, am I as good as them? Ask, am I better than I was yesterday? Just one question, but it decides whether you live in pressure or in progress. Someone else's stage isn't your standard, and your backstage, with all its hidden corners, stumbles, and the mornings you struggle to get back up without anyone knowing, is exactly where real success is built. Brick by brick, day by day. Not noisy, not flashy, but real. If this video touched you in any way, leave me just one comment. Who do you compare yourself to the most? And starting today, what question will you ask instead? Don't write it for me. Write it for yourself. I read every comment, and the answer you write, it isn't just a comment. It's the first step you take toward building your own yardstick. And from that moment on, the game's changed.